Hey everybody, welcome to Tech Tuesday. This is Rick Uzzi. Today I am going to be talking about some concerns that have come up about the RDOF auction. I'll be right back. Hey, thanks for joining me again. This is Rick Uzzi with Decorum. So the topic today is RDOF, which is the Rural Development Opportunity Fund. And just as some quick background, that is a fund that the FCC put forward, which uses money from the USF fund, which is the money that they collect that we pay on our phone bills. So when you see that USF charge or some other regulatory kind of charge, a lot of times that's what it is, a couple of dollars a month. It's actually gone up over the years as there's been less telephone service to pay for that. But so RDOF is taking this money, and similar to the Connect America Fund, it then had an auction. It was a reverse auction where service providers would bid for how little assistance they would accept to be able to provide rural broadband. So to be able to provide broadband in areas of at least 25 megabits per second down, 3 megabits per second up in rural areas. And again, it was a reverse auction, so it started out at a certain level, kind of like name that tune. I can name that tune in 5 notes, 4 notes, 3 notes. Well, I can deploy broadband with 50% of support, 40%. So they're accepting, basically their bid was to be able to bid as little as they possibly could accept in order to do that. So that helps save the American taxpayer money. It helps hopefully make these deployments more efficient, but it can also, I suppose, it could be seen as people underbidding, and then when they do that, maybe they don't have enough money to be able to actually do what they said they would do. Now, there are supposed to be penalties in here. They need to be able to deploy this within a certain time frame, and it remains to be seen whether they can do that. With Connect America, there have been some complaints that some people have not met the milestones that they needed to, so they've been given a little bit of leeway there. But again, this is over 10 years that this needs to be done, and at certain times they need to be meeting a certain percentage. And if they don't, then some of them have been given some leeway. But there have been some complaints about this auction on some of the people that have won money and the technology that they are claiming that they're going to use. And one of the things in this RDOF auction was that in this case, the FCC was really trying to weight this so that people would be more likely to win if they were bidding gigabit service. So it was gigabit down, and I believe 500 megabits per second up, that they would meet with certain levels of latency and a certain amount of data transfer allowed per month, like there was 2 terabytes, I believe. So that was an incentive for people to bid that way. You could bid and win if you didn't do gigabit service, but it was weighted so that if you were going to go ahead and bid a gigabit service, that you had a better chance of winning. And some of the complaints are coming regarding some of the technology that's used. So let's talk a little bit about that. So one of the first things we saw was pretty quickly Congress came out and said they really wanted the FCC to vet these winners, or the people that had bid and then filled out their short form application and then won the auction. And that's kind of the order that it took place. So there was a short form application where the bidders would fill out some basic information about who they were, their financial stability, their technology expertise, the technology they were going to use, but not real detailed. And then the next step was the auction. And then for those who win the auction, now they needed to fill out a long form application. And those applications were due by January 29th. So those are all in now. And the FCC is carefully looking at those, hopefully carefully. So some congressmen, bipartisan congressmen, 155, I believe, 153 senators plus Klobuchar and Thune, so 155 senators and congresspeople, House, went ahead and sent this letter asking the FCC to thoroughly vet this, because they're concerned that the people that have bid and win will not be able to meet what they've said they could do. And of course, the reason they're doing that is because somebody's lobbying them to do that. They don't know. It's not like 155 senators got around and said, you know what, I think this RDOF thing, I'm not sure that's going to be appropriately vetted. So there are some industry people that are lobbying them to send this letter in addition to things that they are doing. And as an example, well, here's the letter. So you see they sent this at the time, January 19th. So this was when Chairman Pai was still the chairman, and now it's the Democrat Rosenworcel, I believe. So you can see it was signed by the people that were sponsoring that, and then additional folks, so 155 there. And you can see it's a good mix, and it's interesting, it's actually more Republicans than Democrats. So you've got your Senate Democrats listed here, Senate Republicans, then you've got your House side, you've got your House Democrats, and your House Republicans right there. So there's actually more Republicans that are signed on to this. So again, they were most likely lobbied by folks like the rural electric co-ops and their associations. Co-ops really participated heavily in this. There was one consortium of like 90 or so electric co-ops, EMCs, that were bidding on this, and they are really that's a good plan to do, because they're the folks that serve rural areas with electricity, right? So they've got power poles or other facilities that they are using to get that electricity out to customers, so they're covering that. And if they can get funds to be able to deploy fiber, that's fantastic. And a lot of times they have fiber already. Maybe they've got fiber going between their particular power stations, and they're doing maybe smart grid kind of stuff. So they're in a good position to be able to do this. And they get some funds, and sometimes they can partner with others, like they may partner with the local incumbent telephone company. There's some partnerships there. So they're in a good position to be able to deliver rural broadband, probably in one of the best positions as far as a wireline kind of technology, because they have a lot of the facilities already in place. So this is I think the thing was here, let's see, electric cooperatives discuss their concerns. I couldn't highlight, normally I highlight these articles on the browser, but for some reason this particular site was not highlighting. So cooperatives discuss their concerns in a virtual press conference organized by the NRECA. And the NRECA is an organization for rural co-ops, and then I think also the NRTC, National Rural Telecom Association, was involved in that as well. So they're concerned about what is going on here, and their concern is that a lot of their members were kind of cut out of this because their members were proposing fiber, and because of that there's some high costs there, and they feel like they were underbid because of some other things. So you can see here that NRECA and the NRTC did do this fairly long letter, I guess, or report to the FCC, and here their executive summary. They're concerned about two things, which would be the technology network design. So they're concerned that, again, maybe certain technology like wireless cannot meet the gigabit standards that people have said they were going to do, and then they're concerned a little bit about the financial qualifications of some of these companies, that maybe they're not fully vetted, they haven't provided service to large areas before. So they've laid out their concerns in a rather long document. And I'll put some links on in the comments section after the broadcast at some point today. I'll put those down there. For some reason, the last two broadcasts I've done, I've not been able to put those links in advance, so I'm checking on that. I don't know why, but there does not seem to be the ability to put a comment in before I go live. So I will go ahead and do that, so you'll have access to this particular document here, so you can look through that. And here, another association, this is the NTCA, urges the FCC to employ transparency and accountability in measuring the RDOF procedures, or accountability measures in RDOF procedures. I also could not highlight this article. Well, I could, but you can't see it, it's so light. So here, the Rural Broadband Association today submitted a set of 3 recommendations for the FCC to increase transparency and accountability in the agency's review of long-form applications by provisionally winning bidders in the RDOF auction. Provisionally winning because they won, but they need to now complete their long-form application, which is going to be looked at by the FCC, and the FCC doesn't like something in there, they're going to go back to them and say, you need to fix this, or maybe from there move on, and they don't get the funds. So this is the time now, and that's the reason we're seeing a lot of this activity. This is the time now to get to the FCC and say, hey, you really need to scrutinize this and make sure that these people can do what they're saying. Specifically, NTC and NTCA encourage the commissioners to adopt objective technical standards for review, permit third-party review and comment on the applications. So it sounds like they'd like to have a say in what these applications look like, and then come back and say, if they're saying they have experience or their members have experience, that, hey, this can't be done with what these people are promoting. And then publish rationales for the agency's final determinations with respect to each application. So after the fact, when the FCC approves all these things, they're going to want them to report on that. So those are some reasonable. I don't know about the third party, having third parties look at it, but certainly the FCC needs to publish their rationale for letting certain companies bid. Some providers themselves are saying that this doesn't seem fair. Windstream is one. Windstream CEO is skeptical about some RDOF rural broadband funding winners. CEO Tony Thomas, you can add him to the list of those who have questioned whether some RDOF winners will be able to deploy the networks they've committed to building at the level of funding that they won. So that's two things. One is, technologically, can they do it? And then secondly, if they can do it, but they're saying even in some cases where some operators have bid fiber, it seems like the amount of support that they accepted for that does not make it reasonably where they can get a return on their investment. So they're saying that they kind of undercut everybody, and they're not going to be able to make it work because it won't pay for itself. And obviously, you can take some amount of funding, but if you're not making any money and you've got a business, that's not going to help the people there that you said you're going to serve. So the vast majority of Windstream's wins were for gigabit service, which the company plans to deliver using fiber broadband. And that was interesting because 85% of those people that won this auction said they were going to provide gigabit service, even though you could go as low as 25 by 3. 85% said gigabit. One of Windstream's key concerns about gigabit is gigabit fixed wireless, Thomas said, was that RDOF rules require winners to make service available throughout the entire census block. So one of their big concerns is this gigabit wireless. Is that even possible? And again, the rules require that service be available through an entire census block. So while you might be able to set up, what they're saying, while you might be able to set up fixed wireless service and maybe get gigabit service using millimeter wave, for example, 5G millimeter wave, you have to do that throughout the entire census block. And if this is a rural community, just doing 5G millimeter wireless is difficult because the number of cell towers that you need and the fact that you need a lot of fiber backhaul to hook all of that up. So what they're saying is you might be able to do it in some areas like a town or where you've got some population density, but then trying to reach out, and where it's flat, let's say, but trying to reach out to other areas, especially if there's trees or hills with something like millimeter wave, you have to have line of sight. So that's the point he's making there. He says topologically it makes it difficult to do that ubiquitously. That's his point. RDOF rules specify penalties for not making service available to all locations in a census block. So unlike before, where under CAF2, for example, Connect America Fund, where basically what the FCC was counting was if you could service, if one customer was being serviced with the qualified broadband speed, let's say 25 by 3 in a census block, even just one customer, then that entire census block was considered covered. And that was a big complaint about counting how many broadband subscribers we have in this country and who actually has broadband. Well, here you've got to reach the whole census block, and you've got to be able to get somebody signed up if they want your service within like 10 days. I'm sure there's some leeway there if you're having, if there's some issues. 10 days seems kind of aggressive, but what they don't want is somebody to say, oh yeah, we can provide it here, and then a customer calls and say, hey, I'd like your service, and then 6 months later is when they get it, because you got to put up a wireless tower, you got to lay fiber or cable or something like that. So you're supposed to be able to deploy this to anybody that wants it within 10 days. For example, he expressed a concern that a number of very small companies won such a large swath of the U.S. footprint. So he's concerned about companies that are smaller that maybe don't have the experience and may not have the financial stability to be able to do this. He questioned the logic of allowing companies to bid in the auction before they were fully vetted. So that's, again, a lot of people have complained about this process of this short form application because there is some vetting in that. You do have to provide some financial information. You have to provide some basic technology plans and explain how you're going to do it, but it's not it's not that onerous, because I'm sure the FCC wants people to be able to participate in the auction, at least put in their form, and then participate in the auction, decide if they want to do that, and then later the FCC looks at it in more detail to see if they can actually do it. So people are complaining about that first form being maybe a little bit too loose. One idea might be to require bidders to make a refundable deposit before participating in an auction, is what he said. He noted that spectrum auctions already have that requirement. So you can see here that, again, Windstream is a provider, and there's other providers that are complaining about the process, or that they didn't get all of the census blocks that they wanted because they were undercut by some other technology. Here's a blog, Pots and Pans, that a lot of people read. The FCC drops the ball on RDOF. How did the FCC fail? They allowed fixed wireless technology to bid as a gigabit technology. So he's bringing up the same point, that fixed wireless isn't going to work. He says he likes fixed wireless, but he says, when serving large areas, there are many places today where it's routinely being used to deliver 50 megabits per second, 75 megabits per second. I've even seen speeds approaching 150, maybe 200 megabits per second. But as nice as that is, it's not gigabit, and fixed wireless is not a gigabit technology, nor is it a functional equivalent to fiber. By allowing WISPs to claim gigabit capabilities, the FCC cheated huge numbers of people out of getting fiber. So he's saying, by allowing that to happen, a lot of people that were going to deploy fiber either dropped out of the auction, basically, because the price got too low for them. It got too rich? No, it got too poor, I guess, because it's a reverse auction. So they had to drop out, and the fixed wireless bidder won, and he's saying that that's kind of killed it for other people. There were numerous electric co-ops, small telcos, CLECs, fiber overbuilders, and public-private partnerships in the auction, hoping to bring fiber to entire rural counties. And looking at the footprints won due to this fiction, I'm guessing the FCC's decision to allow fixed wireless to falsely bid as gigabit technology killed fiber construction to at least a few hundred rural counties. And this was a controversy before the auction started. So as the FCC was going through their notice of approved rulemaking and the report and orders and all of this stuff on RDOF, they kind of went back and forth. They flip-flopped a little bit on a couple of issues, one of which was wireless. At first they said wireless can't bid. And then I think they said maybe they couldn't bid on gigabit, but then the final answer anyway was that wireless could bid on gigabit. Maybe because of 5G, and the case being made that 5G can offer that. But again, if you're going to do 5G, it's very short distances, high attenuation, so trees, even moisture in the air, will disrupt the signal. So 5G is very difficult to do in rural areas if you're talking about lots of area and very few customers. But like I say, they flip-flopped on that. The other thing was on satellite, they flip-flopped on that. First they said that satellite could not participate, and where they landed on that was that satellite could participate, but not in the gigabit realm, because they had not proven that you could do that. So maybe because 5G was proven that it could offer 1 gigabit service in certain scenarios, then they allowed that in there. 6 of the top 10 winners in the auction will be deploying wireless technology, and together account for over $3.2 billion, more than a third of the entire auction award. That list includes 4 wireless companies along with Windstream and Frontier. So it's interesting that in the prior story, Windstream was saying, hey, this is stupid that wireless is in here, we're going to be doing it with fiber. But they're counting Windstream as doing it via wireless. So maybe Windstream in their application mentioned wireless. And we'll see here in a minute that others mentioned wireless, but yet they still are saying fiber is really what they're going to be doing. So maybe there's nothing here to any of this, we'll see. Interestingly, WISP that didn't exaggerate the capability of the technology got clobbered in this grant. So he's talking about somebody like Mid-Continent here that was given money, granted money in CAF 2, and they bid the same way. So they would be bidding at speeds of 100 megabits per second, which is higher than the FCC's minimum requirement of 25 megabits per second down. But yet they got clobbered because there were other people that were bidding gigabit speeds to be able to do this. So again, if you bid gigabit, then your bid was weighted less. If you bid 100 megabits per second, then you had a weight that was attached to your bid, so you were less likely to win. Here's another story. And this is saying that some of these guys that had wireless on their application are leaning away from that. some RDOF winners lean away from fixed wireless. Chief Executive LTD Broadband, which is one of the ones that was mentioned in one of the stories I was reading, as a big winner. They were a big winner in this auction, and they are a big wireless provider. The top winner in the RDOF auction, with a total of $1.3 billion in funding, told Light Reading the company's network build-out will rely almost exclusively on fiber. So even though these guys are wireless and they would have had wireless listed on their application, they're claiming they're going to do it with fiber. It says we're doing GPON. We believe that fiber is a 40-plus year asset and is largely future-proof to provide 10 and 100 gigabits per second in the future over the same glass we're putting in today. So in other words, they'll lay the fiber and they'll be able to do a gigabit today, and then as technology improves with laser technology and other ways to encode the light and OFDM and who knows what else they're doing through, by sending these light signals down the glass in a way that can improve the efficiency, maybe get up to 100 gigabits per second without having to change out the actual glass. You might have to change out the lasers and some other stuff, but so it is future-proof. It says we might use some multi-gigabit capable licensed links to do some middle mile where fiber might be a challenge to place. But for LTD broadband, the overall network, including last mile, will be 99.9% fiber. So what he's saying is they might do some backhaul. And if you're doing wireless and you do a fixed point-to-point wireless shot, then you can get higher broadband speeds because you're just going point-to-point. So you're not worrying about a multi-point kind of thing where you're serving a lot of customers with one antenna. You're just basically one antenna shooting to another, kind of a backhaul. So I think that's what they're saying there. So they're primarily going to use the wireless for that, according to what he's saying. All the companies that participated in the RDOF auction filed short-form applications listing the bare bones, basics of their network build-out plans. Winners in the auction were required to file their long-form applications. Again, that was January 29th when that deadline hit, which provide the exact details about how they plan to meet those obligations. With the FCC last week, an agency spokesperson said the FCC is currently reviewing those documents and will release them publicly at a later date. So we will at some point see what those look like and see what people were bidding. And I think, again, here they're saying they're going to do it primarily through fiber. Another wireless provider, Etheric, explained it expects to deliver 1 gigabit per second and 500 megabits per second, 1 by 500, voice and broadband connectivity using a hybrid approach that relies on a combination of dark fiber and fixed wireless technologies and licensed and unlicensed mid-band and millimeter wave spectrum. So mid-band, they're not going to get gigabit service. I don't think they're going to be able to do that. The company said it has assembled sufficient licensed spectrum to provide gigabit services using licensed spectrum to more than 90% of the locations within its RDOF footprint, and would cover the remaining 10% with a combination of fiber and unlicensed spectrum. So it sounds like they are going to be doing a lot of it via wireless. So we'll have to see how they do that. Maybe they bid in some areas where they can have a better chance of doing a 5G millimeter wave deployment that will actually work. So I'm trying to think of what scenarios that would be, because again, it's difficult in rural areas because you need lots of small cells to be able to do that. You need line of sight. Let's see, was there anything else in there I wanted to read? Oh, yeah. Nextlink won $429 million in the RDOF auction and recently announced an agreement with tower giant American Tower to use up to 1,000 cell towers to broadcast fixed wireless services across 11 states, ranging from Illinois to Louisiana to Nebraska to Wyoming and Wisconsin. Now, again, they don't have to cover that whole state. They bid on certain census blocks within those states. So maybe there's a census block where they're saying wireless is going to be able to work, again, possibly through millimeter wave. It doesn't say if they said they were going to do gigabit or not, so maybe not. It says Windstream and Charter embrace fiber. In RDOF, we don't believe fixed wireless was the right technology, and we already heard about that from Windstream's CEO Tony Thomas there. So the other complaints that people are making are about SpaceX. So again, this was another flip-flop from the FCC, where at first they said SpaceX had not proven their technology, so they could not participate. And then later, they flopped back to that and said, oh, they can participate. But they did say they can't do gigabit. So I'm sure that SpaceX made a case that, hey, we've got some we've got a few tests that we've done, and we've demonstrated through this test. And it would be kind of, it would be unfortunate. Well, I don't know. I mean, you know, their whole premise, or a big part of their premise, is that they can reach anyone, basically. If you can point to almost anywhere in the sky, you can get broadband from SpaceX once they get this constellation of satellites up. So these are low Earth orbit satellites. They're like 65 times closer to the Earth than a geostationary satellite that you might normally see. So these constellations that are orbiting up there. And they've already tested it, and now they've got quite a few test customers up on it. So it would be a shame that they don't get to participate, but one of the complaints is that they'd be doing this anyway, right? So it's not like a telco, for example, that will take these funds on something that would normally be very expensive to roll out for a particular area, an assigned area, and then they take that money and that's where they're going to deploy broadband, right there. Whereas SpaceX is not doing that. They are launching these satellites. They can cover the whole world eventually. Right now they're covering North America. They just signed up, they're signing up beta customers now in England, in the UK. So one of the complaints is that they're going to be doing this anyway. So why are we giving them money? And it doesn't just have to be rural, it could be anywhere. So the Federal Communications Commission faces pressure from internet service providers to deny a planned $886 million subsidy to Elon Musk. Let's see if I can make this bigger so I can read it over here. Yeah. There we go. To Elon Musk SpaceX for beaming broadband to underserved areas from space. More than 1,000 of Starlink's craft are now aloft, which is pretty amazing. This has just happened over the last year or so. They've got 1,000 of these satellites up, providing service to test subscribers. The company says its system is uniquely positioned to deliver high-quality broadband service to the hardest-to-reach rural Americans. And he's right about that, in that, again, these are orbiting up there, so once they're there, there's no last mile to worry about. It's basically coming through satellite. But that doesn't stop complaints about it winning a competition for subscribers from the RDOF, in part because the service was being built without the aid and isn't limited to rural areas. So again, they were doing this anyway, and it's not limited to rural areas. It's not like they're targeting some rural area. SpaceX's broadband from orbit is a completely unproven technology, said Jim Matheson, CEO of the NRECA, which has members that vie for funding. And again, that's the Association for Rural Electric Co-ops. Why use that money for a scientific experiment? So he's, as we know, he's not happy about that. And again, this kind of, you can see why, because their customers, their EMCs are in rural areas, and they would be, they're opting to provide fixed service, let's say through fiber, to those customers. And you know what? If they ever, you know, they're concerned that their complaint is that they're not getting the money that SpaceX is getting maybe. But if they eventually do get fiber to these rural areas, customers are going to want that instead of a satellite, I would think. So if they can get the fiber out there, then that locks SpaceX out, because I don't think anybody's going to want to pay for SpaceX, which might be $90 a month, if you can get fiber from your local EMC or your local telco. I suppose that I don't know if SpaceX could subsidize the price for customers. I don't think that would be something that would be allowed. I think it's more for covering some of the cost to provide the service. Maybe the startup cost of having the phased array antenna that you need to do it. SpaceX was approved for its plan to provide service to 642,925 locations. That's really specific, in 35 states. But consumer advocates say those locations include parts of New York City and airports in Newark, New Jersey, and Miami, places that don't fit the program's goals of bringing service to rural people beyond the reach of broadband networks. So what's going on there is there are census blocks where there's nobody, there's just no customer that's getting service, so there just was nobody to get broadband service. So I guess SpaceX saw some census blocks that were open, and since they can provide the service with no additional outlay of cost, they went ahead and bid on that, right? Because the satellite's up there, it's not going to take anything more to deliver that service to somebody who wants it down on the ground. So some of these areas were like in rural areas like New Jersey, Miami, and airports and whatnot. we have seen a lot of naysaying from competitors. Corey Hauer, president of LTD. Oh, this is the guy from LTD that said they're doing they're not going to do everything wireless. We've seen a lot of naysaying from competitors. He said in an email, "We take our obligation very seriously and will not disappoint the rural residents that have been waiting for broadband service. SpaceX's chosen locations include 2 slivers by the Harlem River in the Bronx. Other spots selected by SpaceX include terminals at Newark Liberty International Airport, Miami International Airport, according to research from research by the policy group Free Press." And they say the FCC never should have allowed SpaceX to participate. They will serve those customers who request service with or without the FCC subsidy, and that's true. They're not going to turn down a customer, and they'll be able to service anywhere that somebody can see their satellite from the ground, which is going to be pretty much everywhere. It's going to be even easier than like DirecTV or satellite internet today, where you have a geostationary satellite and you got to pick a certain spot in the sky and aim it. So if there are trees in the way, you have to worry about getting trees down or something like that. In this case, if you have a spot of sky, then those satellites are most likely going to be crossing that, and you'll be able to track with those and get your internet. And again, more complaints or more people lobbying against SpaceX participating in this. New research highlights concerns whether Starlink will meet federal broadband capacity requirements. The Fiber Broadband Association. So this is the Fiber Broadband Association and the NTCA, which we already talked about. So the Rural Broadband Technology Association. Now I can't see that because that's in the way, so let me just make that smaller. So they submitted to the FCC a technical assessment and a model to aid the agency's efforts to scrutinize the RDOF long-form application for LEOs, or low Earth orbiting satellites, specifically SpaceX and Starlink, right? SpaceX awarded almost $900 million of the assigned RDOF funds to SpaceX with a commitment to connect a little more round number here, 640,000 locations across the U.S. with Starlink. And they're claiming that, so they're saying that they've looked at everywhere that Starlink is going to be getting this money and the number of subscribers, potential subscribers there, and they're saying that they're going to face a capacity shortfall by 2028, and over 56% of Starlink's RDOF subscribers would not be fully served. And I would think that they're talking more about capacity there, because again, if you can have a view to the satellite, you can get it. The sample analysis conducted on Starlink technology was based on Starlink's RDOF commitment and reported fleet specifications. So the number of satellites that they have up now, maybe, but they're planning on launching 60 at a time for some time now. I mean, they're going to continue to do that. Anticipated peak broadband usage demands were calculated through the year 2030, and using optimistic network conditions, the research showed that Starlink may fail to provide enough bandwidth to over half of all subscribers at peak hours. Further, the analysis indicates that additional states with RDOF locations awarded to Starlink will not achieve the required obligations if these satellites were to serve non-RDOF commercial subscribers. So what they're saying there is, again, this is not just, they're not just limiting it to provide broadband to these rural areas. They're going to be using these satellites for non-rural customers, could be commercial customers in non-rural areas. So they're saying that because Starlink is doing that, it's all the same infrastructure, the satellite technology that's up through the air, that's needs to get down to the Earth to provide these services, that they're not able to meet the demand. So I guess that remains to be seen. We really don't know. You know, I think Elon Musk wants to launch a minimum of like 12,000 satellites. He's got 1,000 up now, and I think they maybe even had requested the ability to do 30,000 or so. So he's looking at it as, I'm going to get as many up there as I need to be able to cover this bandwidth. They've, as I mentioned, already have 1,000 up there, so who knows how many they can get up there and what their capacity will be. I don't know if that's been proven yet. The FBA will host a webinar on Tuesday, February 16th at 11 a.m. Eastern Standard Time to explore this research in depth. So Fiber Broadband Association will be doing that webinar. There's a link here, and again, I will, after this, probably hard for you to read up here. You have to type all that. So at the end of this broadcast, I will go ahead and post some links to a few of these things that you might want to check out afterward. And then finally, this is one more story that I just thought was interesting. So here, it's a senator trying to block Frontier from getting this RDOF funding because he's saying that they've failed in the past to be able to meet the obligations that they had signed up for. And that's Frontier. They say Frontier mismanaged previous funds and shouldn't get any new gigabit money. So Frontier did fall down on some CAF2 stuff. I think that's what they're saying here. A Republican U.S. Senator from West Virginia has asked the government to block broadband funding earmarked for Frontier, saying they're not capable of delivering gigabit speed internet service to all required locations. So I don't know if he's saying they're not capable technically, or he's saying they're not capable of getting it right because they failed in the past. I think it's probably more the latter there, because that's the issue. Capito told Pi that Frontier has mismanaged previous government funding and seems to lack both the technological capabilities and financial ability to deliver on its new obligations. So because of the fact, by virtue of the fact that they failed, he's saying they're going to fail again. Frontier won over 2/3 of the funding that the FCC allocated to West Virginia, despite failing to hit FCC deadlines for a previous round of subsidized broadband deployment in West Virginia and other states. Under the previous funding allocated in 2015 via the Connect America Fund, Frontier was originally required to meet the build-out deadlines by the end of 2020. Frontier told Ars Today that it will now meet that deadline by the end of 2021. So again, they've failed to meet the milestone, and now they're saying it's going to be by the end of 2021. So I don't know if there'll be any fines for that or not. Under FCC rules, winning bidders must deploy broadband to 40% of required locations in each state within 3 calendar years, 60% within 4 years, 80% within 5 years, and they need to be 100% done with that within 6 years. So they do have some time to get this done, but there are these milestones that they need to reach. The FCC wants to make sure that nobody's sitting on this and that they're moving ahead as quickly as possible to get this, this broadband deployed. So as you can see, lots of complaining, lots of lobbying, and it seems to be aimed at the wireless providers and satellite, in this case SpaceX, which is the main one that got lots of money here. And that's because unproven technology, and again, these are things that are much easier to deploy as far as last mile service because it's through the air. So it's either from a satellite or it's from a tower. And these other people that were bidding fiber see that as a more reliable service, more future-proof, more expensive to deploy. So they're complaining that some of these wireless and satellite operator here have an unfair advantage in that. And as we see, some of the folks that got a lot of the money, like TDS via wireless, says they're going to do it fiber anyway. And we'll have to see what SpaceX does with Starlink and how they handle their RDOF funds and what they do with that. So a lot of jockeying going back and forth here, a lot of lobbying from these organizations to Congress and to the FCC, and now it's in the FCC's, it's on their plate basically to go ahead and determine what they're going to do with these applications. So I'm sure based on all this pressure that they're going to take a very close look at it. I'm sure they're going to take a very close look at anything that's wireless as well as Starlink to see what they have to say. So there will be some back and forth there, and we'll just have to see what happens. So I'm looking forward to when the FCC makes its final decision, and when it does, we'll have another broadcast about that so we can chat about it. So thanks for joining me today. Hope this was interesting for you. If so, give me a thumbs up on the video. And feel free to subscribe to our channel. If you're not already, just hit the subscribe button on YouTube and click the bell, and you'll be notified when I am live or post a video. I am live every Tuesday at 3 o'clock for Tech Tuesday. Thanks for joining me, and I will see you next week. Bye-bye.